I spoke with Territory Chief Minister Paul Henderson about Labor's decade in power and where they are today. Paul Henderson, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
A decade ago, Labor took power the first time since self-government, and in 2005 you held 19 seats in the Assembly, and now you rely on an independent to retain power. Why has it gone so badly wrong?
Well, I don't agree with that. I would say that fundamentally the Territory is a much better place than it was 10 years ago, and with a really bright future. And all Territorians, I believe, understand that the Territory does have a bright future and we're heading in the right direction. So I'm very proud of our contribution to the Territory over the last 10 years and certainly look forward to going to the next election optimistic and wanting to work every day to retain the trust of Territorians.
Former CLP politicians have commented that they feel Labor would be in a better position today if Claire Martin was still the leader. Do you feel your leadership may have let the party down?
Oh, look, Territorians will have their say next year. I'm very confident that the Territory is heading in the right direction. Most Territorians, I do believe, feel that we're heading in the right direction, and in terms of the achievements over the last 3 years in terms of securing our economic future through achieving IMPEX, basing their project here, developing us as a regional marine service and supply base. This is all about cementing our economic future, creating jobs for Territorians into the future and seeing the benefits of those investments flow through increased and improved services in health and education. So I'm very optimistic that come August next year people will say that we are heading in the right direction, and I'm going to promote a very forward-looking vision for the Territory over the next decade.
What responsibility, though, do you take for the party being in the position it is now compared to where it was in say, 2001? Well,
I take all the responsibility. I'm the leader, and I point out that we did win the election. I was a member of the party for many, many years where we lost election after election. So we did win that election in 2008. We've worked very hard over the last 3 years to build a better Territory, improve services in terms of health and education and infrastructure right across the Territory, cementing our economic future through developing Darwin as an international base for gas exports and service and supply offshore. We've done a lot of hard work over the last 3 years, and we'll go into next year seeking to retain Territorians' trust for another 4 years.
In the past, the CLP made much of opposing what came out of Canberra from the federal government, and Labor has been much less successful in harnessing this technique, particularly in regard to the federal intervention. Wasn't Labor just outsmarted politically by the federal government at the time?
Look, obviously Mal Brough and John Howard had a political motivation as well as a determination to improve the lives of Indigenous people. What they did so was by way of an intervention. Where we've moved that to now is a real partnership with the Australian government, a partnership that is delivering, for example, $1.7 billion over 10 years for new and improved housing in remote communities, a partnership that's seeing every school in the bush upgraded, new primary healthcare clinics being delivered. This has now turned from an intervention into a partnership that is absolutely critical for the Northern Territory to continue to deliver better services and infrastructure for Aboriginal people in the bush.
But why wasn't this done in the early days of Labor being in Parliament? I mean, it's taken 10 years to see new houses being built and infrastructure in remote communities.
Well, it wasn't for the lack of trying, and the beginning of the Labor government was during the Howard years of coalition governments in Canberra, where Aboriginal issues in the Northern Territory were out of sight, out of mind, until John Howard and Mal Brough saw a political opportunity to try and redefine John Howard's leadership. Now, it's not that we weren't trying to get additional support from Canberra, we were. We do every time ministers from government go to Canberra. That is now transformed from back in 2001, complete neglect from Canberra on those issues, to 2007, a politically motivated intervention, to 2011, a real partnership between the Territory and the Commonwealth Government in a transparent way to close the gap on Indigenous disadvantage, and seeing hundreds of millions of dollars poured into the Northern Territory that were never there before.
Your future for Indigenous policy is very much focused on growth towns, which in effect is not going to see funding go to outstations and homelands. Isn't the recent push for continued federal government funding of those outstations and homelands in effect an admission that the growth town policy is flawed?
We can't turn everything around across the Northern Territory all at once. What the growth towns have done is actually given us focused effort with the Commonwealth and investment in growing those towns that within a 50-kilometre radius, 80% of Indigenous people who live outside of our urban centres live. So this is the first time in the Territory's history there has been an investment pathway dedicated to improving infrastructure, service delivery, in a single policy framework in the Territory's history. We will continue to support additional investment in outstations and smaller communities outside of those growth towns with Commonwealth assistance. But the majority of people are benefiting from the investment that's flowing. You can't be all things to all people and fix every right and every wrong out there overnight. This is about targeting that investment. It's the right policy. We're committed to it, and we're continuing to work with the Australian Government for additional support for outstations.
The AMA's Paul Bowett says while there have been some improvements in the public health arena, the acute care sector is still very much struggling, and in child health, particularly in remote areas, he's not seen the changes that he would have expected during those 10 years of power. He has given the government, in fact, 4 out of 10. I mean, that's not a very good report card in terms of health for Territorians, is it?
Look, I've got great respect for Paul Bowett, and Paul is obviously always an advocate for more and better services, and his comments are for him to reflect on. What I reflect on is life expectancy in terms of child mortality for children being born in Indigenous communities. That's fallen dramatically in the last 10 years. If you look at the rollout of renal services across the Northern Territory, Indigenous people are living as long on dialysis in the Northern Territory as they are elsewhere in Australia. If you look at the life expectancy improvements for women with cervical cancer and Aboriginal women's life expectancy increasing by 3 years, again, we can't change this overnight, but all of the statistics show there have been improvements in Indigenous health, and some of those improvements have been dramatic under our government.
In terms of the environment, your government has been accused of tackling the easy environmental issues like land clearing and park management, but failing to come to grips with difficult issues like carbon pollution and tougher policies on carbon. Do you think you've done enough in that sector?
Well, I'm absolutely convinced that we are the greenest government that the Territory has ever seen. We've made significant commitments to joint ownership and management of parks right across the Northern Territory. We are the government that committed to introducing a cash for containers scheme and standing up to the beverage industry. We're banning plastic bags into landfill. We actually introduced the EPA and gave it stronger powers, something that the CLP never did in 27 years in power. And we've also committed to an extensive and transparent monitoring regime around Darwin Harbour and protected, under legislation, 96% of the mangroves in Darwin Harbour. So I'm very comfortable that we are the greenest government that the Territory's ever seen. And in terms of the environmental movement, there's nothing that any government does that's ever enough. They always want more, and we're committed to protecting our environments, and I think we've done a pretty good job.
Paul Henderson, thanks for talking with us.
Thanks very much.